And we are back. Once again, I am your host, Sun Cypher, and you are in tune with Black Dot Chronicles. Now we're gonna keep on with the keep on. We're gonna keep it moving. I was just making these clips. I'm trying to keep them just right around an hour, give or take, 100 minutes, I should say. So that's why I abruptly finished up with that one because I want, this is a lot of information. So I know, too much information is sometimes as good as no information at all. So that's why I cut that clip when I did. So anyway, let's keep going here as we embark on this chronology of the deplorable class and all of the foundational work they've done for several centuries now, since let's say the founding of the Illuminati in the 1700s. So, and again, it's been way longer than that, but I'm just trying to keep it in like a window of time that seems like realistic to most people that'll be checking for this, right? So we were just talking about your trilateral commission founded by the Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, and one of his main lieutenants is Zbigniew Brzezinski, who has a book entitled The Grand Chessboard, which they break down all the strategy from like the 70s all the way till now about how they're going to take over the world, their plan for global domination. Now here you have this cat. It says in January 2002, all these European countries abandoned their national currencies to share only one common currency, the euro. Again, more centralization, less sovereignty. Moreover, the Nice Treaty removed more powers from the Nice Treaty, my bad. The Nice Treaty removed more powers from the countries to give them over to the European Commission. What began innocently in 1952, this is when the European Union started, was initiated, was founded. But of course, we didn't hear about it until like the 2000s or something, the late 90s or some shit. All right. What began in 1952 as the EEC, European Economic Community, a common authority to regulate the coal and steel industry among European nations. See how they start like this shit so innocently? They have these very menial goals that seem so innocent. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is just for commerce. You know what I'm saying? This is so we can regulate, gold and steel commerce over borders and shit like that. And then it turns into what we see now. But again, all of these contracts have been signed decades and decades and decades ago. That's what you people have to realize. Nobody heard shit about a European Union until like a decade, 2 decades ago, 15 years ago. But this shit was fucking literally founded in 1952. Okay? All right? So the European Economic Community was the predecessor to the European Union, a common authority to regulate the coal and steel industry amongst European nations. Finally turned into Europe's superstate. Jean Monnet, a French socialist, economist, and founder of the EEC, had this in mind when he said, political union inevitably follows economic union. Also said in 1948, the creation of a united Europe must be regulated as an essential step towards creation of a united world, a one world order, under their control, under their vision, under their framework of inorganic, disagreeable, opposite of truth, opposite of progression, opposite of life. This is the reality they want to create for you. And again, H.G. Wells talking, well, not H.G. Wells, but the health general, the one black face that I've shown in all of this, who said that, talking about your kids were basically fucking mentally ill and shit because they, believed in patriotism and they believed in the teachings of their parents, essentially. and we have to cure them of that so they can be international children of the future. Okay, these are these type people. Their view of this reality is fucked. Okay, so as regards the North American area, the merger of its member countries is well underway with the passage of the free trade between Canada and USA. This was in the 90s. This was Bill Clinton right here. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or whatever the fuck. So they want to make Canada, US, and Mexico into one region, one super state. So in the next few years, the free trade agreement is supposed to include all of South and Central. And by the way, Bill Clinton already signed the contract for the super state. It literally already exists on paper. All of the world leaders, or all of your heads of states, or your heads of the corporation of China, I'm sorry, Canada, U.S., and Mexico, back in the 90s during Bill Clinton's reign, they all signed this new contract for this super state, because again, this is all contract law. This is all corporate business. This has nothing to do with patriotism and all of that shit. That's why they're telling you, yo, cut that shit out. This is about business, but it's beyond business. This is about control. This is about making everything as you know it cease to exist. This is about making this planet, your local environment and your global environment, uninhabitable and unrecognizable to sentient beings. This is the ultimate game plan, and I'm giving you kind of like the punchline to all of this right now. The end result of this is that they have been going about the business of destroying the environment, destroying the indigenous peoples of the lands, destroying the indigenous cultures, the indigenous systems, the science of the indigenous population, so that we have no way to recover who we truly are ever again. Okay? So then it talks about these three nations coming together and forming a super state. In the next few years, this free trade agreement is supposed to include all of South and Central America with a single currency for them all. Mexico's President Vicente Fox, who was the president at the time, said on May 6, 2002 in Madrid, eventually our long-range objective is to establish with the United States, but also with Canada, our other regional partner, an ensemble of connections and institutions similar to those created by European Union. All right? Boom. And in 1973, the Club of Rome was founded. Now, I know most of you haven't heard of a lot of these groups that I'm naming right now. They like to keep themselves hidden, like the Bilderberg Group, until Alex Jones blew the lid on that. But in a few minutes here, once I'm done with this, the final thing that I will do is show you a clip of an interview by an ABC Australia reporter in 1973, the very year that the Club of Rome was founded. There was a reporter. It was a big. I'm assuming it was a big media event. Back then, they didn't hide anything. They were so open and honest about their plans for global domination. It was like watching a, what do you call it? Fucking with Mike Myers, fucking Dr. Evil and shit, whatever that joint is called. It's like watching that shit in real time, but they're not acting. Okay? I'm going to show you these group of men who consist of, they make up the body politic of the Club of Rome and all these other private clubs as well. Old white men who pretend to care about nature and third world countries. And again, this is cryptocurrency as well. This same thing that I'm reading to you about how they want to take over and colonize and centralize everything. This is the fight already that's being mounted and is building on the blockchain. In my opinion, the last bastion of freedom of as far as the material world. The material world. I am saying the blockchain is the last bastion of freedom. But let's go. So we'll get into the Club of Rome later. Book note that. Excuse me. Let me just have a drink real quick. Water. So the Club of Rome, a UN operative, issues a report entitled "Regionalized and Adaptive Model of the Global World." The report divides the entire world into 10 kingdoms. All right. Again, I'm not going to get into all of this. All of this is readily available online. I'm just showing you the breadcrumbs, okay? Now we're to 1979. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is given huge powers. Again, you see how they're building out the Death Star. I'm literally showing you the Death Star being fucking constructed right in front of our eyes over all of these fucking decades, spanning almost 300 years. Okay? And again, I never heard the word FEMA until fucking sometime in the 90s, whenever Hurricane Katrina, I think it was. All right? That's the first time I heard of FEMA. And they've been around since 79. All right? So, given huge powers, it has the power in case of national emergency to suspend laws, move entire populations, and we saw this in Katrina. Arrest and detain citizens without a fucking warrant, okay? And hold them without trial. It can seize property, food supplies, transportation systems, and can suspend the Constitution. Every single one of these things we saw happen during Katrina. Go look at the receipts on Katrina and see what happened there. Again, that was just like the test ground. That was like the beta stage. That was the test net for what they would ultimately implement. This is what they do. They always do a dry run. All right. It goes on to say not only is the most powerful entity in the United States, but it was not even created under constitutional law by the Congress. Are you hearing this? The same thing that happened on 911 with the Patriot Act. Okay? Only difference is Congress actually signed off on that immediately. All right? So it was a product of a presidential executive order. An executive order becomes law simply by a signature of the US president. It does not even have to be approved by the representatives or senators in the Congress. You see what's going on here? So the fascist geopolitical state has been fitted out right in front of our eyes. We've been running around at each other's throat on some black and white or some xenophobic Muslim, Mexican, whoever the fuck, Chinese, Japanese, whatever the fuck is. You know, every decade they give you a new boogeyman, a new enemy to distract you. You know what I'm saying? The Red Purge or the Red Siege, Russia, China, Cuba. All your Middle East characters, they're all on the same team. Okay, this is fact. The day that the day that those planes flew into those buildings, Saddam, no, my bad, Bin Laden's uncle was in the White House with George Bush Sr. These are all facts. On the day that those planes crashed into the buildings and the plane crashed into the Pentagon, no American citizen was allowed to fly. Nobody was allowed to fly except the Bin Ladens. All of the Bin Laden family was corralled and was given free pass out of the country. George Bush Sr. and the Bin Ladens were construction partners for years. Okay? For years. This is all fact. This is not conspiracy. So on the 20th anniversary of what we're calling 911, the greatest tragedy that we've ever known since slavery, dare I say, or civil war, which extended into prisoner of wars being captured and turned into slaves. But that's another story, another topic for another day. Okay, but what I'm showing you is the slow and steady erosion of what we thought was freedoms, but they never existed because the very founding of this corporation was based on lies. That's what you people don't understand. There is no Republic of America. That shit's been gone. The moment that the Corporation of the United States was founded, the Republic was dead. Okay? And everything that it represented has been slowly but surely eroded to the point where our freedoms are only slogans that we put on stickers and t-shirts. They really don't exist anymore. Okay? And it's funny because this is FEMA, but they're using these sweeping powers under these omnibus acts based on this global pandemic. Every single nation state that is a charter member or associated with the United Nations, because this is the general, United Nations is like the head office for the franchise of nation state corporations. Okay? Know this. Every nation state corporation at the same time, around March of 2020, March 23rd of 2020 to be exact, like basically seconds after this thing went live, in unison, all the nation states, all the charter members of the United Nations passed this omnibus bill, which essentially, to make a long story short, enacted martial law and suspended any semblance of a constitution. Okay, this is why they're able to get away with all of these obvious and open fascist type policies that everybody's just too, or most, the majority is too eager to embrace. Okay, so this is all of the powers that just at the swipe of a pen, this is the powers that were given to this agency that never existed before, that was never voted on. In any state of national emergency, could be a terrorist attack, a natural disaster, a stock market crash. These are just examples. Here are just a few executive orders associated with FEMA that will suspend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These executive orders have been recorded for nearly 30 years and could be enacted by the stroke of a pen. All right? 10995, right to seize all communications, media in the United States. Remember, listen, just write this shit down. Let's take notes on what I'm saying to you, and then I'm about to show you this clip at the end, okay? 10997, right to seize all electric power, fuel, and minerals, both public and private. 10999, right to seize all means of transportation, including personal vehicles of any kind, and total control of highways, seaports, and waterways. Right to seize, this is 1100. Right to seize any and all American people and divide up families in order to create workforces to be transferred to any place the government sees fit. Executive Order 11001, right to seize all health, education, and welfare facilities, both public and private. Executive Order 1102, right to force registration of all men, women, and children in the United States. 1103, right to seize all airspace, airports, and aircraft. 1104, right to seize all housing and finance authorities in order to establish relocation designated areas and to force abandonment of areas classified as unsafe, y'all. You see where this is going, okay? Right to seize 1105, 11005, right to seize all railroads, inland waterways, and storage facilities, both public and private. And 11921 authorizes plan to establish government control of wages and salaries, credit, and the flow of money in U.S. financial institutions. Now, remember, this was in 1979, okay? 89, 99, 2009, 2019, 2021. 43 years ago, they had the foresight. Okay, so you've been getting little hits here and there. You know, you had all these crises in America, Katrina, 911. Now you have COVID, okay? And every single thing, every single executive order that I just read out to you, in some shape, form, or fashion has been exercised between 19 to 43 years from this was initiated. Okay, and think about it. Authorizes plans to establish government control of wages and salaries, credit, and the flow of money in U.S. financial institutions. This is your boy Andrew Yang. Okay, this is your boy Andrew Yang. You know what I'm saying? Everybody thought that Andrew Yang just came out of his ass with this whole whatever monthly allowance scheme or whatever the fuck they're calling and shit like that, where you don't work no more because the pandemic is so bad, so we can't even be allowed to move, even though all you idiots has ran out and gotten this fucking experimental fucking, can't even call it a vaccine, fucking toxic of concoction in your fucking body or whatever the fuck. Okay? After all of that, you're still gonna be locked inside your fucking crib, not gonna be able to work, gonna have to get a monthly stipend that the government controls. That's why they don't want you fucking with cryptocurrency unless it's their centralized avenues. Okay? This is why you all should be understanding tribalism only works whenever you're tribing up against the establishment, the would-be elite that we know to be the deplorable class. All right? Now, who can forget your boy Bush Sr. and even his father and his father and his father before him? They were all gangsters. This has been generations of the same families ruining nations, all for their end goal of global domination. So what does it say about your boy Bush? Bush Sr. praises the New World Order in a speech of the Union in a State of the Union message. What is a State of the Union more than one small country? It is a big idea, a new world order to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind based on shared principles and rules of law. The illumination of 1,000 points of light. The winds of changes are with us now. Okay? Go back to the creation protocol. God code. It's so important that you go back and check out that whole chapter of everything I did there. Because again, I'm explaining to you. Right now, this is a State of the Union. Okay, so George Bush is talking to the whole of the nation, right? When he talks about it's a big idea, a new world order, to achieve this universal aspirations of mankind based on shared principles of the rules of law. He's talking about shared principles along this small group of deplorable class fuck-ups who somehow think that they know better than us how we should progress in this reality. And when he talks about the illumination of 1,000 points of light, the winds of change are now with us, this is all esoteric, Masonic, subliminal talk, okay? Understand, on the surface level, he's just telling a speech to the masses. But subliminally and esoterically, and again, if you don't understand esoteric, this is just knowledge that's known and shared amongst a small group of people. Only the select group of people are read in on particular aspects of the most illuminating aspect of this reality. This is what he's talking about, okay? This is all it is, fucking good old boy, fucking Freemason, yabba dabba doo, you know what I'm saying? All of this fraternity, sorority, all of this whole shit are just like branches of this source code of destruction of the natural order. That's what this great society represents. And it's very imperative that you go back and watch the creation protocol in its embodiment so you can clearly understand the framework and the roadmap. So moving forward, when you hear these people talking, and I'm talking about, again, taking us back to the blockchain, your favorite personality, crypto personality, you know what I'm saying? Whenever you hear your favorite fucking, you know, whether it be XLM or XRP or Bitcoin or this or that or whatever the fuck, you know, when they're talking about banking the unbanked, and leveling the playing field. Again, these are all like subliminal shots. These are they're talking to their esoteric brethren to let them know that the plan is in motion and shit. All they want to do is make sure all of these people who are not connected in these so-called third worlds are now connected for very cheap based on this blockchain technology, because all you need is a phone and a national ID that's going to be on the blockchain. The companies are already in place. You know what I'm saying? This shit is already happening. There are blockchain crypto companies that the very nature of their business portfolio is to track and trace everything in every aspect of life. This is what they do. Okay? V-Chain, Ambrosia. Go look up the under creation protocol. Go look up the clip I did on Hidden in Plain Sight. Okay? Again, so this is a historical speech, and all of the so-called conspiracy theorists always point this out as one of the it was like a turning point. This is one of the first times in let's say since probably the 70s, early 70s, did they just come out so boldly and speak like this. All right. So then they talk about they talk about Bilderberg meetings, the first Bilderberg meeting that we knew about. You know what I'm saying? And you can thank Alex Jones again for that. I'm not going to really go too much into that. But then you got this guy here, David Funderburk. And he was a former U.S. ambassador to Romania, of all places. Tells the North Carolina audience, George Bush has been surrounding himself with people who believe in one world government. They believe that the Soviet system and the American system are converging. So he's talking about communism and democracy. Or you can say socialism. All these isms, they exist because of this small group of people allowed them to exist. They willed them into existence through their mechanisms of control. It was necessary for these isms to exist so the grand scheme could progress and unfold. And he's one of the main lieutenants in this whole shit, Henry Kissinger. Everybody knows about Kissinger. So in 92, this is what he says. Today, Americans will be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. And this is exactly what they're planning based on what's going on now with this civil war, with this race war, followed by civil war. Right now, we're in the civil war phase in America. The race war didn't work out so well, although a bunch of black and brown faces had to be sacrificed for that. Respect to all the gods and goddesses. So he says, today Americans will be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, we will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, where the real are promulgated, that threaten our very existence. It is then that all people of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. This is again, the language. What he just articulated was a formula. The Hegelian dialectic. Problem, reaction, solution. Okay? Let me read that to you again. He gives a scenario. All right? Today, Americans will be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. Okay? Because so they're going to create a problem. This esoteric elite, deplorable class, is going to create a problem so big that we're going to beg for them to come in and save the day. Problem, reaction, solution. Hegelian dialectic. All right? So he says they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, where the real are promulgated, that threaten our very existence. So what is he talking about? Outside threat from outside. I'm sorry, there was an outside threat from beyond, where the real are promulgated. What is he talking about from beyond? When I read this, I think about all of this ET so-called classified docs that have come out since 2017. in between UK and US especially, but other governments as well, have supposedly emptied the vault on their so-called ET files. So when he talks about an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that makes me think about Project Bluebeam. Go look it up. And again, when I get to my final conclusion in Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon, all of this shit will come into focus. I'm putting everything in the table. And if you go back and listen to and check out what I put forth already, I've already planted the seeds. They're already there. So I've already pretty much given you the conclusion. But, obviously, we'll get to that when we get to it. So then he says, it is then that all people of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from evil. So they're going to make this shit so unpalatable for us that we're going to beg these motherfuckers to deliver us from the evil that they created. So they project they create all of these think tanks and private groups and organizations that create all of these problems and theses and scenarios and shit. Then they throw more money at organizations to so-called resolve these problems, which means they're actually throwing money at organizations to make sure that these problems come out just the way they want it to, so they can get the result to move the agenda forward. All right? So it is then that all people of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from the evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. That's exactly what we are facing now. And again, this is just the opening act. When he talks about outside threats from beyond, real or promulgated, this is what we're on the brink of right now, people. Okay? They are going to create a living hell for humans, sentient beings, and all of those on the planet who have souls. And the blockchain is the foundation for that. And again, as I told you before, it's a neutral actor. It's like the chessboard and the pieces on the chessboard. Okay? The game is even. How we colonize and tribe up on this blockchain, I'm saying with each other instead of against each other based on which coin I'm rocking, or based on whether or not I'm rocking the flag of my coin, like you think I should be rocking and vice versa. Silly shit like that. There's a way, way bigger game at play. That's why I call it the digital asset Trojan horse. Okay? So we go down, and the long story short, you got all these different other figures or whatever. I will peep this part about world religion because this is very interesting. So I told you about the first parliament of world religion, where basically they basically streamlined that as well. They centralized that from an international level. Again, UN makes the plan. You have all these auxiliary organizations that I named before, like CFR, RAND, Trilateral Commission, IMF, Ford Foundation, blah, 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 Royal Institute of Fucks, and all of these shits. They are basically, how could you say, they're contracted out, the work and shit, depending on, what needs to be done. And then that trickles down to the corporate nation states. All right? That's how it works. So then you have the second parliament of world religions. That was in Chicago on the 100th anniversary of the first. All right? So like the first convention, this one seeks to join all the religions of the world into one harmonious whole, but it wants to make them merge back into their original element. Traditional belief of monotheistic religions such as Christianity are considered incompatible with individual and enlightenment and must be drastically altered. Remember what I read from you from 1928 from H.G. Wells when he was saying the same thing? Okay? So again, you see the players, you see these hidden figures in the game, all your favorite people in every single aspect of this society, I promise you, they're on this team. They are creating a culture. They are telling you what to think. They are literally programming you of how your reality should be. They institute fear mechanism and fear tactics at every single angle, at every single corner, just to get us to the point. And as soon as they get us there, all gloves are off. They have no more use for us. They want to cull the population down to a very manageable number just to serve them, and they will control us through technology. These are their own white papers. No conspiracy. Okay? And as you're about to see when I show you this one clip from the Club of Rome, the year that it was founded in 1973, from the lips of the deplorable ones themselves. Okay? And we already spoke about the North Atlanta Free Trade Agreement. Your boy Bill Clinton spearheaded that, whatever. It was also under Bill Clinton's reign that we basically did away with Glass-Steagall, which allowed for all of the big fish to eat little fish. Okay? There was only allowed a couple of whales in the big oceans instead of all these little players all the way down to small business owners. So he did away with Glass-Steagall. He entered us into this North American Free Trade Agreement, which essentially made the continent of North and South America one super state. Okay, not only that, but he brought China onto the world stage. It was Bill Clinton and the influence that he projected while he was in office that allowed China to be looked at as touchable to do business with on the world stage, because before this time, Bill Clinton, before 94, China was like shunned. They were off in the shadows. They couldn't build. Their people were in ruins. The poverty level was through the roof. And Bill Clinton decided that we would bring China in, and then the whole world signed contract with China that made China the dollar store for the world. And that's why China has been able to, since, and basically in a matter of almost 30 years, China has transformed its entire, not only its entire domestic economy, but excuse me, China dominates financially globally. China is everywhere. And this is what the West allowed to happen. And they talk about this beef between the West and China, US and China, US and Russia. They're all on the same team. They're all a part of the same groups. They're all Freemasons, Illuminati figures. It's all a game. It's one, the digital asset investor, he likes to quote this one William Shakespeare line: all the world is a stage, blah, blah, blah. And this is what we're in the midst of. A big production, a passion play is what I call them, what they used to do back in Rome. You know what I'm saying? The drama is intense, it's thick, it seems so real, but it's all to get you to condition your mind so they can have free entry to your soul and your spirit. That's what this is all leading to. So, I'm not gonna continue with this aspect of it anyway. But you can see as the decades progress, there's always a new private global entity that's somehow formed around the UN and all of their cohorts that have been put in place to, execute another aspect of the plan. You know what I'm saying? So, that's that part of it. Now, as I close this out, I want to get into the Club of Rome that was founded in 1973. This was a clip I found just recently, maybe a week or two ago, and it was very interesting because, again, it just fell in line with all the research that I'm continuously engulfed in. But what I want you to pay close attention to every single word that is spoken. Pay close attention to what they're saying and everything that I've shown to you. In part two of profane origins, and this will be part 2A of profane origins. If you go back to look at profane origins in its entirety, which is will be 3 parts, part 1, part 2, and now part 2A, you can clearly see the planning, the meticulous planning, the meticulous destabilization of our sovereignty and our spirituality, whether it be religion or alternately just, non-religion or anywhere in between. There's been a complete and destabilization of all the pillars of human interaction. And it's been made in the form of something that they're calling global government, the New World Order. So you can clearly see they want, this was in 1973, so I read for you from 1928, H.G. Wells, okay? I've chronicled from 1748, whenever the Illuminati was founded by Weishaupt. Okay, I've chronicled for you individuals, places, times, and events that has destabilized nations, slowly but surely eroding whatever so-called sovereignty that these nations had to get us to the point that we're at now. So what you're about to see again is someone's talking openly. 3 individuals of back then there were 70 members, charter members of the Club of Rome. I'm sure that number has expanded. And again, these will be the who's who of global politics, finance, every aspect of human interaction. You have the who's who, old, rich, white men that are putting this all together. So this is about 10 minutes long. Check this out, and we'll get back.
It's not some science fantasy effect from 2001. This electronic display emanating from Australia's largest computer is a picture of the condition, past, present and future of planet Earth. The program was originally devised by a scientist working from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Jay Forrester. It was developed under the auspices of the Club of Rome by an MIT research team to present a complex model of the world and what we humans are doing to it. The program, called World 1, doesn't pretend to be a precise forecast. What it does for the first time in man's history on the planet is to look at the world as one system. It shows that Earth cannot sustain present population and industrial growth for much more than a few decades. It shows that simply cleaning up our car exhausts and making some small effort to limit our families simply isn't enough. It's like an electronic guided tour of our global behavior since 1900 and where that behavior will lead us. Well, this is the printed version of what we've just seen on the television screen. What looks at first to be just a maze of computer characteristics is really a system of very simple graphs which project what's going to happen to the planet over the next 150 years if we don't do something drastic to stop it. Down the left-hand side of the graph is the date, 1900, 1940, 1980, 2020, right down to 2060. Now, each of these lines of letters represents a curve showing some aspect of the condition of the planet. The further out this way they go, the greater that figure is, the further this way, the less. For example, P represents population. So here it is at 1900, and then it comes up to 1940, it starts to take off. Here we are at 1980, up to the turn of the century, and then it starts to peter off. Let's now have a look at this next curve, the Q curve, which is the quality of life. And this is represented by, for example, the amount of space people have, the amount of money they have to spend, the amount of food they have to eat. Now, it increases rapidly up to 1940, but from 1940 on, the quality of life diminishes. And here we are about the turn of the century, and we come up to the year 2020, and it's really come right back. More people, of course, means that you start to chew up your supply of natural resources, and this is this curve here. the N curve, and it shows that slowly but steadily the pool of natural wealth in the world, natural resources, minerals, oil and so on, is slowly but steadily diminishing. So this is the situation. As population increases, the quality of life decreases and the supply of natural resources decreases. But have a look at this curve here. This is called the Z curve, and it represents pollution. Now, predictably enough, as the population increases up to 1980, pollution increases. There's more rubbish. But from 1980 to the year 2020, pollution really takes off. This is assuming, of course, that we don't do anything about it. So the year 2020, the condition of the planet starts to become highly critical. And if we don't do anything about it, this is what's going to happen. The quality of life is going to go right back to practically zero. Pollution is going to become so serious, right out here, that it will start to kill people. So the population will diminish. Right back here, less than it was in the year 1900. And at this stage, around about the year 2040, 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist. Well, hopefully, of course, it won't be allowed to happen. But it's taken this kind of shock treatment to nudge governments into doing something, and slowly we are. We're starting to clean up our atmosphere. We're starting to recycle our rubbish. We're doing something positive about population control. But so far, our efforts have really been just a drop in the ocean. The Club of Rome comprises some 70 men of widely varying backgrounds, but their common concern is that the world problems cannot be solved by individual nations. I spoke with Professor Hugo Tiemann, director of the Battelle Institute, Geneva, Dr. Aurelio Pache, founder of the club, and Dr. Alexander King, director of the World Bank and the United Nations OECD. Dr. King, now you're describing the world as a closed system where all these things are interrelated, and yet the government, the control of the system is by individual nation states. Now, how do you convince them to cooperate?
The sovereignty of these nations is no longer as absolute as it was. There's a gradual diminishing, whittling away of sovereignty, little bit by little bit. Especially, of course, in the smaller countries where it's more obvious. But the bigger countries have to do a good deal of this by agreeing to international arrangements for the law of the seas, or for the limits of fishing, or for control of the wavelengths in radio, and 101 other things. But especially in the technological field, I think this is going to be increasingly so because of developments next year. I was at an important meeting in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and Peterson, the former Secretary of Commerce, was saying the same thing from an economic point of view, that the general world economic situation, the interdependence of countries on their food and fuels and so on, is leading to an interdependence which has seeds of draining away of sovereignty within it. So I don't think one can envisage an idealistic of jumping to a world federalism or anything of that sort. But the building up probably in the next decade in a number of particularly sensitive fields like energy, raw materials, the use of the oceans, space and so on, of a number of what people are tending to call regimes, which will not be ordinary United Nations type of organizations, but semi-management organizations. There'll be a great deal of consent in them.
Dr. Pache views the European common market as an elementary example of the kind of regional cooperative which is going to be necessary. What responsibilities does he see for Australia?
Australia, you are in a splendid position.
What should we do?
You have food, energy, space. You are distant from other centers, so you can, for a longer time, feel rather more independent than interdependent. But things of the world are going so fast that I think that an enlightened leadership in Australia should see down the road that Australia will have to lose some of its on self-decisions in order to acquire something else which may be purely political in very wide sense, or maybe also security.
The Club of Rome is reluctant to point the finger at any one nation. Yet clearly, nations like the United States, which consumes approximately 60% of the world's resources, will, in the club's view, have to accept a severe cutback in its voracious appetite. But the club's utterances are cloaked in a velvet democracy, in the hope that their facts will gently persuade.
We will ask who is making the decision and whether the decision makers of today, whether they perceive the problems, what kind of problems, and the interactions of the problems. That's a very pragmatic approach.
Has the time come, Dr. King, when we're going to have to say we can no longer entrust our resources and the exploitation of those resources to private enterprise? Has the time come when governments will simply have to take more control?
Simple nationalization and things like that wouldn't help at all, because we've got to keep an incentive approach. And many of the good aspects of private enterprise are very necessary here, but not in the old exploitative way where the market forces dominated the whole situation.
Dr. Pichai, can you tell me what my lifestyle will be in 100 years' time? What sort of car I'll drive, what sort of house I'll live in, what sort of food I'll be eating?
Probably you will have a smaller car. You will use more common transport means. You will work many far less hours. You will have a wider cultural possibilities that today. You will not be so much pressed by immediate needs, because through technology, organization of the markets, the basic needs will be taken care of. And I think that you will love nature and continue then what I think you are doing now to protect our environment, to avoid this man-made world where the creatures of nature, the animals, the plants, the green spaces, the wildernesses are bound to disappear.
To the Club of Rome, the status symbols of the year 2000 will be the inverse of today's. Prestige will stem from low consumption. That personal consumption will have to be less is plain enough, but for that privation to be seen as prestigious would seem to indicate some radical rethinking, at least for the fat cats of the planet.
And there you have it. So again, that clip was from 1973. A reporter from the Australian Broadcasting Company, which is a public television network over here in Australia. Looks like he was at the groundbreaking ceremony or something for the Club of Rome, and he interviewed the founder and two other head guys from other, these private organizations that want to control the world. So a couple things here. I'm hoping you guys caught all of that. I did take some notes, and I actually presented this video a couple of weeks ago, but the internet was fucking up, so I just thought that it was obviously more appropriate inside of this particular production anyway. So now I'm just giving it to you again for those of you who may have seen that first clip. So what I just showed you there was, in the beginning, you were shown this, the results of a study that was done initiated by this MIT professor, computer science professor, who generated this algorithm to look at like the trends of humanity from the 1900s going all the way up into the year 2050 or 2060. Okay? They had a few indicators like a Q curve, which is quality of life, N curve, which was natural sources, and a Z curve, which represented pollution. And they looked at how we have trended from 1900, and they gave all these different little segments in time and how things are going and how they're projected to be by the year 2000, by the year 2020, and by the year 2060 or whatever. So I'm just gonna go over a couple of notes real quick, and then we'll be out of here. So this was in 1973. That conversation you just had was the same year of the founding of the Club of Rome, a private group consisting of private white men, white men from the private sector across the board of all industries, right? So they built a complex model of the world, past, present, and future, and what we were doing to it based on those three indicators I just said to you. And I don't know if you guys caught that, but the name of the computer program was called World One, okay? And it looked at the system, the world as one complete system, or one world order, a new world order as George Bush called it. And it basically said that at this current trajectory, the Earth can sustain the population based on industrial growth and these other factors, right? So, as again, I told you, it's basically tracking 150 years of past, present, and future of global trends according to them. All right. So they're basically saying like quality of life diminishes from 1900 to 1940. Everything is going good. 1940 quality of life diminishes, and they were projecting in 1973, but by the year 2020, life as we know it would cease to exist if we didn't interrupt the current trajectory of the human population based on consumption and all these other indicators. Okay? So when they talk about quality of life, they're talking about like, living space, how much money you make, food, basic, food, clothing, and shelter things or whatever. So that's like the Q curve. The N curve is dealing with natural resources, and that they're just predicting, how much natural resources we will use from 1973 based on what we've used from 1900 to 1973. All right? So they're saying as population increases, the natural resources will decrease, which will decrease the overall quality of life for the human population. All right? So the Z curve, they're talking about the pollution in between 1900 and 1980. Population and pollution increases. Pollution takes off. And again, like I said, they're saying, assuming if we don't do anything about it, so they're saying pollution is going to be the biggest factor in culling the herd as far as like the human population or whatever. I guess they have augmented that plan and added as a component of that equation global pandemic. All right? So they're basically saying by the year 2020, if it's not fixed, the global quality of life goes back to zero, which it was in 1900. And they're basically saying pollution will be so serious that it will start to kill people. Looks like it's starting to kill, well, we've seen it kill more animals than people. That doesn't mean that it's not killed more people. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of studies that we can kind of calculate and, all the attributes that lead to pollution of all these different environments that we interface on a daily basis. I'm sure those numbers are up there as well. And the thing that's very interesting to me, so you have these men that have been shaping, creating culture for centuries, almost 300 years plus. Okay, but we'll just keep it in short term, 300 years. So all the laws that have been passed, all of the politicians, all of the businesses, all of the innovations, all of these things, they've checked off on all of them. So they knew in 1973 that pollution was going to be a problem. But here we are still in 2021, and fossil fuels are the main utility being used in an industrial age. When we had men like Wilhelm Reich and Nikola Tesla, who lost their lives because they gave us a different reality that didn't involve fossil fuels and pollution. So they killed those men, okay? But then they're going to, on the flip side, tell you that in order for all, this is really about, in order for us to take your sovereignty, we're going to give you disease, we're going to give you war, we're going to give you famine, we're going to give you everything until you submit, till you fucking go down on your knees and beg for this global military force called the UN, United Nations, to come in and save you. Okay? So again, Club of Rome back in 73 consisted of 70 men. That one of many groups or clubs decided that they were going to shape the world. So one of the quotes from one of the three men that were interviewed, Dr. King, he describes the world as a closed system controlled by individual nation states. And that's the problem to them. Going all the way back to H.G. Wells, he told you sovereignty, you know what I'm saying, these closed systems, all of this, you know, we got to take care of us. You know what I'm saying? That shit, they didn't want that. They didn't want this patriotism. They didn't want like traditional beliefs and formulas instilled in the generations, okay? They didn't want any religious sentiment at all. All of that they've been wanting to do away with for a long time, but they themselves are religious. It's just that who and what are they who and what are they worshiping, and the energy signatures that are associated with that. All right, so he states, the world as a closed system controlled by individual nation states. He says, sovereignty of these nations is no longer as absolute as it was. There is a gradual diminishing and withering away of sovereignty, little by little, bit by bit. Especially, of course, the smaller countries. I mean, they're telling you, like, in plain English, we're going to take out the smaller countries first because, you know, of course, they have no fucking choice. You know what I'm saying? And then we'll move on to the big countries like in the West and shit. So these so-called third world nations. And I heard, shout out to my brothers over at Crypto and Down. I think they're on right now as we speak. Brother Asher L. and J.J. Wentworth. When they're talking about Confessions of an Economic Hitman. The author of that book is John. I can't remember his last name, but he worked for, you know, these alphabet agencies and shit, and his job was to go in and destabilize these countries, these third world so-called nations in all of these plethora of ways and shit, and make them succumb to the will of this global domination plan. All right? So he said, especially, of course, the smaller countries, when it's obvious, but bigger countries have to do a good deal of work to get to this point. And then he starts going into detail. He says agreeing to international arrangements for law of the seas, okay? So that's maritime law, for the limits of fishing or for the control of wavelengths and radio and other things, especially the technical fields. So he's saying not only do you have to release your sovereignty, but we want your minerals, your radio waves, we want all your technology, we want everything, okay? And then he goes on to say, this same gentleman, he talks about this meeting he had with, then was like one of the cabinet ministers for the government of the day, and he was basically saying that this guy agreed with him as well. He said the general world economic situation, talking about the independent countries, you know what I'm saying, and their food and their fuel and all of these things, whatever, is leading to an interdependence. So he's saying the interdependence and the erosion of sovereignty of these countries by making all these treaties where you have a lot of countries, even these Western countries, where you make a product, but that product doesn't really see life in your country. You have to ship it to a country halfway around the world. And this is especially true for a lot of these third world countries. Third world countries are basically like the bread baskets the shopping carts for the rest of the West and shit, where they force them into these treaties and shit. Otherwise, the economic hitman comes in and ruin the country via assassinations, other means that they have at their utility and shit like that. And they force them into these treaties and shit that make them liable to feed the rest of the fucking West and shit, right? So this is what he's describing here. So he said the interdependence will be the seeds of drawing them into a global sovereignty and shit. And then he goes on to say, I don't think I envisage an idealistic of jumping to a world federation or anything like that. So the reporter asked him, do you think we're basically going to have to just go in and just shut down all private business and let government take over everything to get this, to get this shit going? 'Cause the reporter is really excited. You can tell, he's read in on the very low levels and shit or whatever. He's just excited to be amongst these fuckheads and shit, right? So then the dude replies, he says, I don't think one can envisage an idealistic and jumping to a world federalism or anything like that. So he basically means just a global fascist state. He said, we can't just go from 0 to 100 or whatever. He said, but building up, and probably in the next decades, in a number of particularly sensitive fields like energy, raw materials, use of oceans, space, and so on, of a number of what people are tending to call regimes, which will not be ordinary UN type of organizations, okay, but semi-management type organizations. There'll be a great amount of consent within them. So he's telling you what they're going to do. They're going to create all of these privately funded, privately organized fucking agencies, like these NGOs, as the term is called, them, these non-governmental organizations that really set the framework, the template, the rules for global societies and shit. And he's saying they're going to be on our team. We're going to control them, right? You know what I'm saying? So then this guy, Dr. Pacici, who is in fact the founder of the Club of Rome, the reporter's talking to him about his views on the European Union. He says, my views on the European Union as an elementary example of regional cooperative, which will be necessary. Australia, you are in a splendid position. You have food, energy, space. You are distant from other countries. So you can, for a long time, feel more independent rather than interdependent. But things of the world are going so fast that I think the enlightened leadership, remember the esoteric language, I think the enlightened leadership in Australia shall see down the road that Australia will have to lose some of its own self-decision, some of its sovereignty, in order to acquire something else, which may be purely political, or in a wider sense, maybe security. So again, they're telling you, yo, you work for us, okay? You work for us. So, it goes on and on. Go back and check that clip out and really listen to what they're saying, because they're literally telling you in black and white, yo, you motherfuckers, we're going to use nature as the fucking excuse, okay? That's going to be your new God, even though they hate nature. Look at what they're doing to the planet. You know what I'm saying? It's not like your retail customer and shit that goes out and buys all of these products and shit. It's not like we are the one that are lobbying to keep these products. We want this zero energy technology, right? We want this Tesla technology. We want this Wilhelm Reich technology. We want all of this fusion technology, okay? We want all of these things. We want the blockchain because we want decentralization, okay? We don't want to be pinned down, but they want to use the blockchain to centralize you once again and give you a universal basic income because they're going to create the environment that will be so fucking miserable that none of us will want to live this life as we have, and we won't give a shit about our sovereignty. This is their plan. This is why I'm saying we stand strong. Tribalism, there's only one type of tribalism. It's the people that with souls that care about the generations that come after them, that care about the livelihood of their planet, that care about the livelihood of their neighbors. We all breathe. Those of us who have souls, we have one common destiny, whether we like it or not. Okay? There is an order, just like there's an order to everything, and we can get into the science of that at another time. But right now, we need to unify first and agree that the natural order comes first. As I plant a seed in the ground and I nourish it with organic nutrient, it will flourish and perpetually grow. The residual effect is seed upon seeds upon seeds upon seeds. Generation upon generation upon generation upon generation of the framework that the creators put in place, I should say. So with that, I will leave you. That wraps up part 1, part 2, and part 2A of Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon, Profane Origins. All right, the birth of the deplorable class. Once again, I am your host, Sun Cypher. This is the lab, so the Sound Lab, and you have been in tune with Black Dot Chronicles. Until we meet again, one love, one life. Respect.